Four military Humvees surrounded a small-town diner on a quiet Tuesday morning. Soldiers moved with tactical precision, their boots hitting pavement in synchronized rhythm. Inside, an 81-year-old man sat calmly at his usual booth, a red mark blooming across his weathered cheek. 22 minutes earlier, a leather-clad giant had made the worst mistake of his life. He had slapped a Vietnam veteran. Not just any veteran, but a man whose son happened to command an entire battalion at Fort Campbell. The biker thought he was teaching an old man a lesson about respect. Instead, he was about to learn what happens when you touch someone who has brothers in every corner of the military. The coffee in Bill Dawson's cup had gone cold, but his resolve had not. Outside, Colonel Michael Dawson stepped from the lead vehicle, his jaw set, his eyes locked on the diner entrance. What happens when you slap a man who has brothers everywhere? Staff Sergeant named William Dawson wore his age like a badge of honor. At 81, his spine remained straight, his handshake firm, his eyes clear with the kind of wisdom that only comes from surviving what should have killed you. The scars on his hands told stories he rarely shared, stories of rice paddies in the Mekong Delta, of firefights inside Saigon's narrow streets, of brothers who never made it home. 3 tours in Vietnam had earned him 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star, but those medals sat in a drawer at home. Bill did not need medal and ribbon to remember who he was. Millbrook, Kentucky was the kind of town where everyone knew your name and your history. Nestled just outside Fort Campbell, home of the legendary 101st Airborne Division, the town breathed military culture. Every family had someone who served, someone who deployed, someone who understood the weight of the uniform. Main Street flew American flags from every lamppost. Rosie's Diner, with its chrome exterior and red vinyl booths, had been feeding soldiers and their families for 4 decades. The walls displayed faded photographs of local heroes, their faces young and determined, frozen in time before war changed them. Bill had returned from Vietnam in 1973, married his high school sweetheart Sarah, and built a quiet life. He worked at the hardware store, raised 3 children, and never complained about the nightmares that sometimes woke him at 3 in the morning. His son Michael had followed him into service, but where Bill had carried a rifle through jungles, Michael excelled at logistics and strategy. Watching his son rise to the rank of full colonel filled Bill with a pride he struggled to put into words. Every phone call between them carried layers of meaning, a language only soldiers understood, where concern hid behind tactical discussions and love expressed itself through questions about readiness in supply chains. Tuesday mornings at Rosie's were sacred to Bill. He arrived at 6, claimed his corner booth with the view of Main Street, ordered black coffee, and read the newspaper while the town woke around him. The waitress, Jenny, knew his order by heart. Frank, the manager, always stopped by to shake his hand. Other regulars nodded in respect when they passed his table. The army cap Bill wore was not for show. It connected him to a brotherhood that transcended time and distance, a reminder that once a soldier, always a soldier. This morning should have been like any other. The coffee was hot, the newspaper crisp, the autumn sunlight streaming through the window warm against his face. But violence has a way of finding good men, even in the quietest corners of America. The biker filled the doorway like a storm cloud, his leather jacket creaking as he surveyed the diner with predatory eyes. He was massive, well over 6 feet tall, with arms thick as fence posts and a swagger that screamed aggression. His boots thundered across the checkered floor, and conversations died in his wake. The pleasant morning atmosphere evaporated, replaced by the tense silence that comes when decent people sense danger but do not know how to respond. His gaze settled on Bill's booth, the best seat in the house, tucked in the corner with privacy and a view. Something about the elderly man sitting there, straight-backed and peaceful, seemed to trigger something dark in the biker's mind. Maybe it was the military bearing Bill could not hide, even at 81. Maybe it was the quiet confidence of someone who had faced real enemies and felt no need to prove himself to anyone. Whatever the reason, the biker had chosen his target. "Hey, old man," his voice cut through the diner like a blade. "I want that booth." Bill looked up from his newspaper, his expression calm but alert. He had learned long ago to recognize escalating aggression, to measure threat levels, to calculate response options. This situation required de-escalation, not confrontation. "There are plenty of empty booths, son," Bill said quietly, his tone carrying the natural authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "No need for trouble." "Trouble?" The biker laughed, harsh and ugly. "Oh man, you don't know what trouble is. I want that booth, and I'm going to get it." Bill studied the younger man's face, reading the signs he had learned to recognize in Vietnam. This was someone looking for a fight, Someone who had already decided violence was the answer. No words would change that trajectory. I've been sitting here for 20 years, Bill replied, taking another sip of his coffee. But if you really need this particular spot, I suppose I could. The slap came without warning. A vicious backhand that knocked Bill's army cap from his head and sent his coffee cup flying. The sound cracked through the diner like a gunshot. Hot coffee splashed across the table, soaking Bill's sleeve. The red mark on his cheek bloomed instantly, a violent flower against weathered skin. The diner froze. Jenny, the waitress, gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Frank stood paralyzed behind the counter. The few customers present sat in shocked silence, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Someone had struck an elderly man, a veteran, without provocation or mercy. Bill bent slowly to retrieve his cap, coffee dripping from the table onto his jacket. His hands did not shake. His breathing remained steady. At Aididmana, he still remembered how to kill efficiently and quietly. But violence was not the answer. Not here. Not now. He had better resources available. "Excuse me, miss," Bill said to Jenny, his voice steady despite the burning in his cheek. "Could I use your phone?" The biker stood over him triumphantly, apparently satisfied with his display of dominance. "That's right, old fool. Know your place." Bill walked slowly to the payphone near the restrooms, ignoring the biker's continued taunts. The call was brief, coded in the language of military efficiency that transcended generations. "Michael, it's Dad. I'm at Rosie's Diner on Main Street. I've been assaulted by a civilian. Could use some backup." Then Bill returned to his booth and sat by the window, his demeanor unchanged. He checked his watch, sipped the fresh coffee Jenny had brought him without being asked, and waited. The biker continued his performance for the uncomfortable audience, unaware that he had just triggered a response that would demonstrate the true meaning of military brotherhood. Outside, 22 minutes away, Fort Campbell was mobilizing. Colonel Michael Dawson was reviewing deployment schedules when his father's call came through. The calm tone could not hide the underlying message. His father, a decorated combat veteran who had survived 3 tours in hell, had been attacked and needed help. Michael's response was immediate and absolute. "Sergeant," he called to his aide, "assemble a response team. 4 Humvees, full crew. We have a situation in Millbrook involving a veteran assault." Fort Campbell transformed into a hive of coordinated activity. Within minutes, 4 vehicles were loaded, engines running, soldiers briefed. These were not just any troops. They were Michael's most trusted personnel, men and women who understood that this was not just a family emergency. This was an assault on one of their own, and the military took such matters with deadly seriousness. The convoy departed the base in perfect formation, diesel engines rumbling as they headed toward Millbrook. Inside the lead vehicle, Colonel Dawson sat silent, his jaw clenched, his mind calculating response protocols, while his heart wrestled with the image of his father being struck by some coward. The 22-minute drive felt like an eternity and an instant simultaneously. Back at the diner, the biker's confidence had grown into full arrogance. He slid into Bill's booth, spreading his arms across the back of the seat in territorial dominance. "See how easy that was, old man? Sometimes you just need to know your place." Bill remained silent, occasionally checking his watch with the precision of someone accustomed to coordinated operations. His calm seemed to frustrate the biker, who had expected either cowering submission or futile resistance. The other customers began quietly asking for their checks, eager to escape the increasingly volatile situation. Jenny tried to intervene diplomatically. "Sir, maybe you could just take another booth. Mr. Dawson's been coming here for 20 years. "I don't care if he's been coming here for 50 years, the biker snarled. "This is about respect, and this old fossil just learned what happens when you disrespect me." Frank, the manager, watched nervously from behind the counter, torn between calling police and avoiding further provocation. The few remaining patrons shifted uncomfortably, caught between their desire to help and their fear of becoming the next target. Then, subtle changes began occurring. The rumble of heavy vehicles became distinct, growing louder with each passing second. Those sitting near windows noticed unusual activity on the normally quiet Main Street. Bill's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, relaxed patience replaced by alert readiness. The biker, absorbed in his performance, missed these signs completely. He continued his monologue about respect and consequences, unaware that his 22 minutes of dominance were ending. 4 military Humvees pulled up outside Rosie's Diner in perfect tactical formation, their presence transforming the quiet street into something resembling a combat zone. Soldiers emerged with practiced efficiency, their movements coordinated and purposeful. They were not in full combat gear, but their bearing made it absolutely clear these were serious military personnel responding to a serious situation. Colonel Michael Dawson stepped from the lead vehicle, his uniform crisp, his expression grim. At 6'5", he carried himself with the authority of someone accustomed to command, but the concern in his eyes was purely personal. This was a son responding to his father's call for help. The biker's bravado shattered like glass. "What the hell is this?" he stammered, his earlier confidence evaporating as he took in the sight of armed soldiers positioning themselves around the diner. Inside, Bill remained seated calmly, but pride shone in his eyes as he watched his son approach. This was not just military backup. This was a demonstration of bonds that connected all who had served, transcending rank, age, and generation. Colonel Dawson entered with measured stride, his eyes immediately cataloging the red mark on his father's cheek. "Dad, are you all right?" "I'm fine, son," Bill replied steadily, "but this gentleman seems to think he can assault elderly veterans without consequences." The biker attempted to backpedal. "Look, this is all a misunderstanding. Your old man and I just had a disagreement about seating." "Sir," Colonel Dawson's voice went deadly quiet, "you assaulted a decorated combat veteran. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a federal crime." The biker's face went pale. "Federal crime? It was just a slap." "The old guy is my father," Michael replied, "and you're about to learn what happens when you assault the family of an active duty military officer." Sheriff Tom Bradley, himself a Desert Storm veteran, arrived moments later. After reviewing the security footage, he placed the biker under arrest for assault on an elderly person, assault on a veteran, and disturbing the peace. As handcuffs clicked into place, a young boy who had been watching from a corner booth approached Bill with wide eyes. "Sir, are you really a soldier?" Bill smiled, the first genuine joy he had shown all morning. "I was, son, a long time ago." The boy straightened his small shoulders and attempted a salute, his form imperfect, but his intention pure. Bill returned the salute with military precision, and the diner erupted in spontaneous applause. In the days that followed, Rosie's Diner quietly designated Bill's booth as the Veterans Table, installing a small plaque honoring all who had served. The story spread through military networks, inspiring similar demonstrations of support for veterans across the country. The phrase 22 minutes became shorthand in military circles for how quickly the brotherhood rallies to protect its own. Bill discovered new purpose in his later years, becoming an advocate for veteran rights and using his story to bridge military and civilian communities. His ordeal had reminded everyone that respect is not earned through intimidation, but through service, character, and the courage to stand up for what is right. If this soldier's journey moved you, please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to BR Veteran Stories to hear more tales of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds that connect those who serve. Because every veteran has a story worth telling, and every story deserves to be heard. Thank you for your support.